It is close to evening, but not quite. But my name is Tina Mazzacane. I'm the K-12 math coordinator here at the Virginia Department of Education. I'd like to introduce our team here at the VDOE that's joining us tonight. Kristen Williams-Foss, she is a math and special education specialist. Thank you for being here, Kristen. Deb Delosier, she is a math specialist that primarily works with elementary mathematics. Thank you, Deb. And Jessica Brown is a mathematics and intervention specialist, and she's joining us tonight as well. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for joining us tonight for the second in a series of 3 webinars that address the transition of math instruction to the 2023 Mathematics Standards of Learning. As you probably are aware, the Virginia Board of Education approved the 23 Mathematics Standards of Learning to be our new standards for the next 7 years. It was approved on August 31st, 2023. So we have been working to help you transition to those new standards, and this webinar is part of that work. So tonight we are going to provide an overview of a new resource that we just posted on our website called Instructional Supports for Prioritization of Content Documents. And this resource includes the prominent content changes between the 2016 Math Standards of Learning and the 2023 Mathematics Standards of Learning. And it has some instructional notes to help support school divisions in making decisions about prioritization of content during the 23-24 school year. School divisions may wish to use this when they're planning for instruction based upon whichever option you're choosing in your school division for transition, whether it's option 1 or 2 or 3, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But also in determining how to supplement existing curriculum to incorporate the content from the new 23 standards to meet the needs of students during this transition year. So one important thing that I want to say, and I'll say this again later on, is that these documents will support you in making decisions about prioritization of content. That decision is in the hands of the school division based upon the option that you choose. So these documents are not intended for the VDOE to say, please teach this year and not teach that. That's not their intention. And we'll make sure that you hear that more than one time tonight, but we just want to make that very clear. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about some of the other documents that already exist around the 23 Math Standards of Learning. We'll talk a little bit about transitioning. Then we'll dig deeply into some of these prioritization documents and give you a little glimpse of some of the secondary examples that we have around transition. So first, we wanted to let you know that our office has been partnering with 26 educators from across the Commonwealth to help support the work of developing technical support documents that guide school divisions in implementing the new standards. So as you can see on the screen, these educators come from a multitude of different school divisions, large divisions, small divisions, and sizes in between. And they represent different perspectives about what is needed for support in a school division as we move to implementation of the standards. So we're very, very appreciative of these folks, and we wanted to let you know that their participation and collaboration has been strengthening the work around what the VDOE is doing to help support you. So in the chat, we have been putting some links, as you could see, and one of the links that's going to get dropped in there in just a moment is a link for a document called Options for Transitions to the 2023 Mathematics Standards of Learning. And this particular document was developed to support the transition to the 2023 standards, and it is linked on our 2023 Standards of Learning webpage. So as you can see from the slide, there are 3 options for school divisions to choose from as you transition during this 23-24 school year. The first option is for there to be a full crosswalk year, which means that teachers would provide instruction in both the 2016 Mathematics Standards of Learning and the 2023 Mathematics Standards of Learning. Option 2 would be a partial crosswalk year in which students would receive primarily instruction in the 2016 standards, but with choices for prioritization of key content from the 2023 mathematics standards. And then option 3 is that students would receive instruction solely on the 2016 math standards of learning and use the current school year to prepare for full implementation of the standards during 2024-2025. So again, school divisions are making these choices based upon the best interest of the students in their school divisions. So as I mentioned, we've been collaborating with the math transition team, and they've been very busy developing documents to support implementation. So you could see in the chat, we've been putting that 2023 Math Standards of Learning link in the chat for you to kind of see where some of these documents are. But we wanted to, on the next slide, just give you kind of an overview of what's out there already. As we mentioned, the Board of Education approved the Math Standards of Learning. So in front and center in this slide is the Math Standards of Learning document. And that document exists in a K-12 document, which is a cumulative of all the grade levels and courses. And then you can also go into just an individual grade level or course for the Standards of Learning in both PDF and Word format. In the upper left-hand corner of this screen, you'll see there's a slide that shows the overview of revisions documents. Those are also available K through 12 as a cumulative document and also individually as a grade or course level document. And those documents are as well included in both PDF and Word format. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see what that document we just talked about, the transition options document, and that's linked on the 23 Standards of Learning webpage. And then the newest document, the new guy on the block, are the instructional supports for prioritization of content. Those are the documents that we want to talk to you about tonight. So as you can see on the next slide, there is a chart that kind of nicely puts all these and organizes these together for you. It looks very similar to our chart that we have for the 2016 Standards of Learning, and it's organized in a similar fashion. But again, this is a separate web page for the 2023 Math Standards of Learning. And you can also see on this particular slide that there's a column that's titled Narrative Overview of Revisions Presentations. And those are PowerPoint presentations based upon the overview of revisions documents that our transition team put together that really walk you in very detailed form through the changes between the 2016 and the 2023 standards and helps you kind of look at that more closely. So those two documents paired with the prioritization documents we're going to talk to you about tonight will hopefully equip you to be very informed about the changes in the standards and how you might be able to fold some of the 23 standards into your current instruction this year. So just to walk you through some of the format of the standards documents that exist currently, this is the document that is the standards document, and it has in bold print at the top the standard. This is an example of a 6th grade standard. And then underneath each standard, there will exist a knowledge and skill, and they're labeled A, B, C, and D. And you can also notice here that and we didn't include the notation, but there are asterisks. And remember, the asterisks, just like in the 2016 standards, mean that this is content that students cannot use a calculator when they're assessed on the SOL assessment. So that asterisk is also included in the 23 standards document as well. The next slide shows an example of the new numbering system for the 2023 standards that makes it clear within which strand each standard exists. So this particular sample on the screen indicates 6 NS1. So the 6 indicates the grade level, so 6th grade. The NS indicates number and number sense, the strand. And then the 1 indicates that this is the first standard of learning in that particular number and number sense strand. And then you can see at the bottom, there's a key that provides abbreviations for each of the strands. And make note that in algebra, geometry, and Algebra II, the letter would exist at the front, and there's also different strands in those particular end of course courses. So you'll notice that those are a little bit different than the ones we have for K through 8. The next slide shows an example of the overview of revisions document. And this is that document that compares the 2016 and the 2023 standards of learning. One thing that we do want to remind you about is that there was a similar document in June that went to the Board of Education that was based upon the draft standards of learning. And this particular document is now based on the final version of the standards. So if you happen to have an old version from the June draft standards, you don't want to use that one anymore. It should say draft on it. There should be big notation on it, but just to make you aware that there are draft versions out there. But this is, again, that side-by-side comparison between what we have in 2016 and those approved standards from 2023. At the bottom of each of the overview of revisions documents, there is a table, and there's 4 quadrants in the table. The upper left quadrant in the table, in the 6th grade example is shown on your screen, shows how the numbering has changed between 2016 and 2023. The right-hand side of the table lists any parameter changes or clarifications that may have occurred. And what we mean by parameter changes or clarifications, it could be an increase or decrease in limiters of the standards. It might be related to the depth of understanding or the content of the content or the scope of the content. So all those things might be considered parameter changes or clarifications. Note, however, that this section is not all inclusive, so there might be some changes or clarifications that are not listed here. These are the prominent ones that we wanted to make you aware of. The bottom 2 quadrants of the table in the overview of revisions documents show deletions and additions from that particular grade level or course. So you can see here where we have deletions for grade 6 and additions for grade 6. So now we want to take a little bit of time to dive into these prioritization documents that we've been talking about. These are newer documents that were just posted on the website last week. And these instructional supports for prioritization of content documents outline the prominent content changes between 2016 and 2023. And they do, as we said before, include some instructional notes to support school divisions in how you might decide to best prioritize content during the 23-24 school year. In conjunction with these, you might want to use those overview of revision documents and those narrated PowerPoint presentations to really make sure that you're getting the full glimpse of what's changed between 2016 and 2023. And again, we want to reiterate here that these prioritization documents are just meant for the school division to make decisions about prioritizing content. So the school division is going to use this information about the changes between 2016 and 23 to help them make good decisions about how they may wish to fold content from 2023 into the current school year's instruction. So just being clear about the purpose of these particular documents. So there are instructional supports for prioritization content for all the grade levels K through 8, and then for the end of course grades, Algebra I, Geometry, and Algebra II. And the documents are all structured very similarly, and as mentioned before, are most powerful when they're used in conjunction with the other 2 documents, the overview of revisions document and the narrated PowerPoint presentations. So let's take a quick look at the 3 different components of this document, and then we're going to dive into some actual examples from content to give you a better look at what this means. So there are 3 sections in each of these documents. The first section is titled Critical Instructional Transitions. And this includes content that if instruction's not provided during the current transition year could cause some gaps in student learning. And we'll look at an example in just a moment. Overall instructional transitions is the second section in the document, and this includes overall content changes that span across grade levels and help promote deeper understanding of concepts. And we'll look at examples of that also. And then specific instructional transitions by strand include suggestions for transitioning from the 2016 to the 2023 by blending specific content from both sets of standards. So that's really a good explanation of what this document is really intended to do. So this is an example on the slide of a critical instructional transition. So dilations, which is a transformation that we learn about in measurement and geometry in grade 8, is being moved to grade 7 in the 2023 standards. So basically what would happen if current 7th graders don't learn the content this year, they won't receive content in it next year, or content instruction in it next year either. So there could be a gap for those students. So even if you're a school division that has opted for option 3, where you're teaching solely the 2016 standards, you may want to go ahead and take a look at these critical instructional transitions, because they might give you a glimpse at some content you might just want to fold in this year. And again, critical instructional transitions are included only where applicable. So there may not be one in every grade or course. You'll have to look at each particular grade level or course to find those. The next example we have is about the overall instructional transitions. And these are changes that were made in the 23 standards that promote deeper understanding of concepts for students. So you can see on the screen the embedding of the 5 mathematical process goals is an example of that, and then the infusion of the data cycle into the standards that address statistics help students take a deeper dive into math content. So this section includes instructional notes that outline some of those instructional shifts that might be needed or considered, along with pointing out some specific content changes that might accompany these 2 overall transitions. So this is a helpful way to kind of dig in deeply into those overall transitions. And then the third section, which we're going to dig into a little bit more deeply, is the section for specific instructional transitions. On this particular slide, we're kind of showing how at the bottom, where we have the overview of revisions document for 8th grade, and the top is the corresponding part from the prioritization document, how we can kind of see how those nicely kind of blend together. So first, we can see the 2016 compared to 23, and then the instructional note about how if students are comparing and ordering numbers, teachers might want to provide some opportunities for other strategies like benchmarks and number lines, etc. So those are the sorts of ideas that we're going to talk about now in more specifics. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Williams-Foss to go over some middle school examples with you.
Thank you so much, Tina. Yeah, we're just going to share with you an example from each grade level, so you kind of have an idea of what some of the particular changes might include. The first grade level we'll talk about is grade 6. So on this slide, you actually see the slide that comes from our narrated overview of revisions PowerPoint, which is very similar to our overview of revisions document. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, it has the 2016 standard of learning, and then on the right-hand side has the 2023. And you'll also notice that any prominent changes are highlighted in red font. So those of you who are familiar with grade 6 content, you know currently for 2016 in 6-7C, they're solving problems that include area and perimeter of triangles and rectangles. And for 2023, rectangles has been deleted because that is taught in grades 4 and 5. And in replacement of rectangles, parallelograms are included in grade 6. And you'll also notice throughout all of the geometry standards, you'll see this developing the formula idea to really help the students get a deeper understanding of formulas and where they come from and how to apply them. So when you take a look at the prioritization document, it gives you instructional guidance in terms of how you could fold this new content into this year's instruction while you're teaching standard 6-7C. So prior to solving problems involving triangles and rectangles, provide opportunities for students to develop those formulas and to help them figure out where those formulas come from using manipulatives and pictorial representations. And then you can extend that knowledge from parallelograms and triangles into, from triangles and rectangles into parallelograms, because really when you think about the formula for parallelograms, it's based on rectangles and triangles. So really just extending that deeper understanding would be a great way to fold in some of the content from 2023. You'll notice that in all grade levels, really, our data standards, our probability and statistics standards are pretty hefty in changes in 2023 compared to 2026 or 2016. So here's an example from seventh grade. Seventh grade currently in 7-9A represents data in histograms. So you'll notice for 2023, we have several new knowledge and skills that go with the data cycle, which Tina had talked about in terms of the overall transitions. And then you'll also notice some knowledge and skills that extend data understanding, like sample size and randomness, looking at why using different intervals might affect how the data is represented in histograms. So when you take a look at the prioritization document, it really helps teachers kind of understand how they could fold some of this content in while they're teaching histograms this year. So including some of those knowledge and skills in terms of the data cycle, formulating questions, determining what data might be needed to answer the question, and then also to possibly provide some opportunities to work on some of the other knowledge and skills in terms of using technology for creating histograms, looking at how sample size and randomness ensure that the data is representative of a larger population and so forth. And then the example for grade 8, actually Tina talked about this a little bit in our general example for specific transitions. But in 8th grade currently for standard 8.1, students comparing and ordering real numbers, that actually correlates with 2023 8NS1, comparing and ordering real numbers and determining the relationship between real numbers. You'll notice that you don't see bullet A on 8NS1 on this particular slide because that actually came from a different standard in 2016. It came from 8.3. So just looking at these correlations, you'll notice in red that we're really wanting students to use multiple strategies like benchmarks, number line, and equivalency, and then also justifying their solutions. So again, when you look at that prioritization document, it gives you instructional guidance in terms of how can you fold this additional content while you are currently teaching 8.1. And our next example comes from Algebra I, and Tina's going to go ahead and explain that one.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Before I explain this one, I wanted to remind you that we do have a Q&A in our webinar. So if you have any questions, you can post them and we'll kind of try to address those when we're done sharing some of these examples with you. So please feel free to type into the Q&A and someone from our panel will take a look at that and try and respond to your question. And so when we look at this particular example in Algebra I, currently SOL A.3 is about simplifying radical expressions, and that becomes the 4th standard within the 2023 standards of learning under expressions and operations. So the 23 standards now clarify for students that they'll be performing addition, subtraction, and multiplication with expressions that include cube roots as well as those with square roots. And then additionally, this is probably content that is even more new. Students are going to be simplifying radical expressions and exploring equivalencies of square and cube roots with rational exponents. And so when you take a look at the instructional notes that the prioritization document provides, it does talk about, having students have those experiences with both square and cube roots, which they wouldn't normally get with the 2016 instruction, but also to start to think about the rational exponents and how to express square and cube roots as something to the 1/2 power or to the 1/3 power. So those equivalencies will set kids up very nicely as they move into higher level mathematics, and they're looking at those conversions between square and cube roots and other roots in math analysis and beyond. The next example comes from our geometry standards. So the G.9 standard is now going to be G.PC.1 in the 2023 standards of learning. So the 23 standard currently now has students actually proving and justifying theorems of quadrilaterals and justifying properties of quadrilaterals. So you can see here's an example of where we're embedding some more of the mathematical process goals into the standards. Additionally, students in 2023 are going to be using some of the constructions because, as you know, in 2023, there is not a specific geometry construction standard. It is now embedded across some different parts of the content where it most applies. So here they'd use congruent segments, congruent angles, angle bisectors, and then perpendicular and parallel line constructions to actually verify the properties of quadrilaterals, which is going to give them a much deeper dive into how constructions actually support some of the work that we do in the content. And then direct proofs aren't specifically listed in the new standard, but they'd fall under deductive reasoning. So you could see when we look at what the prioritization content document says, it talks about, well, having students kind of go that extra mile and really start to verify and use those properties and having those experiences of justification. And then to actually, we're going to be teaching geometric constructions this year. Let's go ahead and bring them up in this particular part of the content so students can actually benefit from those experiences and take a look at that. So the final example comes from Algebra II. Our A2.1c 2016 standard is now A2EO3 in the 2023 standards, and this one is about performing operations on polynomial expressions. So part of the standard is new to Algebra II, and it's the adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomial expressions in both 1 and 2 variables. And students will also divide polynomial expressions with 1 and 2 variables. So students are still expected to factor polynomial expressions in 1 and 2 variables over the set of integers. And then with as with the other 2023 standards, one of the big changes that you'll notice is that they're going to be representing equivalent expressions. So when you look at the prioritization instructional notes, they really start to talk about the idea is, students don't often think about equivalent forms of expressions. We oftentimes think about a simplified form, but it really getting students to think about, here's one form of an expression, here's another form that might not be simplified, but why is it equivalent to this form? So having them doing that justification and some of the algebraic and graphical methods that might be included there kind of lends itself to a little bit of a deeper understanding of equivalent expressions. So these are a few of the examples that you'll see in these transition documents that we wanted, or these prioritization documents, sorry, that are part of our transition documents that will hopefully help you as you explore the changes between 2016 and 2023. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to answer questions, and I think Deb Delosier has been monitoring our question and answer for us. And Deb, are there any questions in there that we can address?
There was just one question, Tina, and others may have questions that they want to stick in the chat right now or in the Q&A right now. But the question was about clarification in which of the documents contains the critical content.
Yeah, so each document, K through 8, Algebra I, Geometry, and Algebra II, may or may not have a section with critical content. It just depends upon whether there is content in that specific grade level or course that is considered critical. So you would actually have to go into each particular document to see if there's a section that includes critical content. And you'll notice it right away because it's highlighted in yellow, and it will be at the very top of the page. So for example, if you went into the 7th grade document, you'll see the dilations example that we talked about earlier tonight. So we are happy to